So you and I were talking about copyright, and that reminded me. In fact, I said to you, all the time I've been in the music business, I think only one time has anyone ever voluntarily been generous with me about copyright. And that was many, many years ago with the Jefferson Starship with Paul Kantner.
David Freiberg was in that group?
No.
Kantner.
Paul Kantner. Paul was actually the leader. Grace and Paul were the leaders. So anyway, so I'm down at Wally Heider's recording studio, and I'm first time I've ever worked with them. With the Starship, as it turned out to be, and so I'm working the Moog synthesizer, and this is, a new thing for everybody. So these two guys pop in through the side door into the studio where I'm actually performing, and I don't know who the fuck they are, and so I'm assuming that's cool. So then I look a little more carefully, and I realize, oh, okay, I think I know who one of the guys is. So anyway, these guys are standing there. They're both little guys, sort of gnome-like guys, and they're watching me do, the Moog synthesizer, and they're suitably impressed, and they're, So we take a short break while we listen to a playback, and one of the guys reaches into his pocket and pulls out something in his hand that I can't see, and a clasp knife. And he opens the clasp knife. I'm thinking, my God, what's going to happen next? Then he pops the lid of this little vial and digs the clasp knife into the vial, and then puts it under my nose and said, "Here." I looked at him. What? He said, "Just snort it. Just sniff, inhale with your nose." Oh, okay. So I do that. That was the first time I'd ever had cocaine. Fortunately, I'm not an addictive type, so it didn't ruin my life.
Right.
But anyway, so then these guys, they walk around and ooh and ah about the synthesizer. It's a Moog 3, and then they're gone. So that was Jerry Garcia and David Crosby.
Wow.
Anyway, so at the end of the session, I think I worked there a couple of nights, and then Paul said, "Well, we're going on the road." He said, "Why don't you just stay here in the studio and work?" I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, why don't you make up something? Write us a tune." I said, "Well, okay." He said, "And we kind of like things in A minor." I said, "All right." White keys on the piano, I got it. So anyway.
Just for the audience, what it means, more rock oriented, white keys?
Yeah, well, it's just very simple music.
Simple.
So, which doesn't make it bad. So
it's all music.
So I stay in the studio and I do some stuff, and it's it's the '60s. I'm a crazy guy. They're crazy. I do this stuff that's just completely weird. No melody. It's just stuff. And so Paul comes back, and they're out for about a week. He comes back and he says, "What do you got?" And I play it for him. He said, "Oh yeah." I said, "What do you call that?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess I thought fast. I call it the Universal Copernican Mumbles." Because it was kind of a mumbly piece.
Right.
The Moogs were going. So.
Did you think the coke maybe gave you some enhanced your?
No. Coke doesn't do anything. It increases your self-confidence until you shape up and realize it.
Say the name of the song again. What was the name of the tune?
Universal Copernican Mumbles.
Where did that come from? Just out of the air? Just out of the air.
I just thought of it. So.
No, this is something I want you to talk to the audience about. Tell me the most enjoyable part about preparing for this concert, because.
No. Let's stay with this thing first.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, here's a little bug. So Paul says, "Well, I'll write some lyrics and I'll sing on that." I said, "Okay." Showed he was a brave man.
Kantner, man, I love this. Just passion, man.
Yeah. So then. He said, "Well, it's your tune. He said, I'm going to give you the copyright. I said, well, thank you. Now, it's traditional and it's commonly assumed in musical circles that you know, the writer of the music gets one half of the copyright and the writer of the lyrics gets one half of the copyright. So I thought that, you know, I didn't know very much at that point, but I did know that. I thought it was rather generous. So anyway, about a week later, I get a call. Maybe it might have been a month later. I get a call from the airplane and now the Starship's manager.
Who was that?
Oh, I don't even remember his name, but the guy said, well, he introduced himself and he said, I understand you did some work for Paul. I said, yeah. He said, I want to talk to you about that. I said, okay. He said, now, I know, you know, Paul may have told you that he was going to give you the copyright, but he said, you know, really it's a Starship album, and that's not really the way it works. I said, okay. So you wouldn't have any objection to signing over the copyright? Or maybe he didn't even say that. He may have said, you wouldn't have any objection if Paul copyrighted it. I said, well, but Paul told me I had the copyright. So he acted a little disgusted. He said, okay, look, let's do this. I mean, really, it's very generous of Paul to give you anything for this because, you know, it was basically just a studio improvisation. I said, okay. He said, I'll give you half of the copyright and Paul will get half the copyright as the writer of the lyrics. That's very, very fair. I said, okay. He said, so you agree to that? I said, yes. So that was the way that went down. So I got half the copyright. I mean, I didn't make a lot of money.
But talk about that, the Kantner philosophy. Where in the spirit of generosity.
Paul was a nice man. Paul was a very nice man. I mean, that little vignette just explains, you know.
The best vignette on Kantner on the Jake Feinberg show yet.
Yeah.
Just for the record, for folks out there, you have a beautiful studio upstairs, custom designed studio. But can you tell the story you told me off air about different fur, the cat who came up to see you and how you changed the different fur into a, you know, the stuff that he told you.
What story was that? I don't recall.
No, so the guy who came up with the charts, you know, on how to change the studio to make.
You mean? Okay, John Stork.
Stork,
Yes,
Stork, still around, still cooking. But
yeah.
I think this is important because when you purchased it, you thought it was okay, but then you met him.
Well, no, I mean, look at it. It wasn't a studio when I bought it. It was a warehouse. So me and John Vieira, my partner, in the studio. It was also a commune. 4 musical families lived there. But
which ones?
Well, there was let's see. Margaret Fabrizio was a harpsichordist. Frank Albright, who died tragically very young, he and Jill and their daughter lived there. And then me and my daughter and my wife, and then John Vieira and his son and his wife.
Yeah.
So
anyway, so different fur.
Yeah. So it's a commune. It's a musical commune.
Yeah.
We do some concerts as a commune and at the planetarium, and then it, you know, gradually became a professional recording studio, or that was our intention, but we didn't know very much. I mean, John was an electrical engineer, so he sort of supervised. I was the guy that did the soldering, and he was the supervisor of that. And we built a console and got the whole thing together. But acoustically, we were ignoramuses. Most people were at that point. I mean, you wouldn't believe how bad recording studios were.
It was like 1970?
1968.
Mm-hmm. No knowledge about technology of sound at that point.
I didn't even know there was such a thing as acoustics. Wow. I made it look like something I'd seen. You know, it was like a miniature version of Wally Hyder's studio or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized, you know, this is not good enough. And the studio, as my career developed and the studio began to get better clients, and I realized, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to find somebody that does. So John Storick was the man, and he was a Yale architect who specialized in recording studios. He had done Electric Leaderland for
Jimmy.
Yeah. So I called him up, and said I'd like you to design a new control room and studio. He said fine. So we talked about fees, and it was immediately obvious that I could not possibly afford him. And so he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, you buy me a plane ticket. He was in New York. And give me a place to stay. I'll come out, and I'll make a little sketch of what I've got in mind, and I'll talk you through it. So that was $4,000. So he came out, and we became buds. I mean, we hung out together and talked about. He was very passionate about recording acoustics and had very definite ideas, which were great ideas. And at the end of the week, I had a little 1/4-inch drawing of the plan view of the studio, a little sketch that he'd made of the ceiling treatments, and a whole bunch of information that he'd given me, and I took his design and realized his design. And this studio is, by the way, it's having its 50th anniversary very soon. It's still jamming, and Patrick Brown has it now. We only allow people to buy it whose names are Patrick.
What did he say about glass?
Well, he had something that I thought was very interesting about that. So the way the recording studios are made is that there's a control room where all the equipment is and the engineers are, and then there's the studio room, which is the other side, which is where the music is made. And the way the two sides communicate is through a very, very large window. It's usually about, I would say, 10 or 15 or 20 feet across, and maybe 20 feet across, and 6 or 7 feet high. And it's triple pane. So to keep sound isolation between the two rooms, it was typical to have one piece of glass that would be 3/4 of an inch thick, then two pieces on either side of that would be maybe 3/8 of an inch and 1/2 inch. So a lot of glass. So we're talking about this, and John says, you don't need that. I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't need it. He said, you should just get rid of it entirely. It's all one room. I said, but then the players will be playing, and it'll be going right into the control room. He said, no. He said, let me explain to you about the acoustics of sound. He said, the dB level goes down with the square root of the square root of the distance. So square root, I can't recall. So anyway, he said, you're 16 feet away, so the sound is 1/4 as loud as it was out there. How loud do you play back? I said, well, probably 85, 90 dB. He said, so how loud are they playing out there? I said, probably about the same. He said, so by the time that sound gets to you, it's like 60 dB. He said, you're never going to hear it. He said, you should just facilitate communications between the two sides, get rid of all the glass, and you can just walk back and forth. Now, since that time, I have worked in my own studios and never had glass. I just, put the mic up, and Benny Maupin and I work. He stands there and records, and plays, and I record him. You don't need the glass. It's just, it's a misunderstanding that turned into a convention.
So it's conventional, but he was way ahead of his time.
Yeah,
then.
and he wanted me to do it, but I told him, I said, look, I'm the little guy. Nobody knows, different fur at that time. Nobody knows who I am. If they come in and look at my studio, they're not going to say, gee, he's very advanced. They're going to say the guy doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know you're supposed to be glass between the two sides. So John said, yeah, I understand. So he did design it with triple glass.
By the way, just for the record, Patrick Gleeson produced Eddie Henderson's Realization album. I want to be very clear about that.
Well, wait a minute. Skip Scarborough and I were part.
Skip Drinkwater, or was it Skip Scarborough?
I mean, no. I did work with Skip Scarborough. That was.
You worked with Scarborough too?
Yeah. Yeah, Patty LaBelle and Skip came over and did some work at different places.
Wow.
So,
Drinkwater. But
Skip Drinkwater. So, I mean, what it became apparent to me was that Skip was a money guy. You know, he knew how to make a deal and he knew how to talk the talk, but he was not particularly heavy duty on